Hi, friends. This is Miss Holly, and I have a story for you today called The Relatives Came. And this is published by Scholastic and written by Cynthia Rylant, illustrated by Stephen Gammell. And I wanted to let you know that relatives in America means the people that you are related to. So, your aunties, your uncles, your grandma, your grandpa, your cousins, those kinds of people, people that you are related to, those are called your relatives, okay? So this is a story about families who get together. They come together for a vacation together, and they visit together. They live in another state called Virginia. And so you're going to hear that word Virginia. And Virginia has big mountains. Mountains are where the land is very high and very deep, called valleys. So you have valleys and you have mountains, and you'll see pictures of that in the story. As I'm reading this, I want you to think about if you can relate, if you can understand or feel what it's like to have relatives visit with your family. Maybe you have relatives here in America that come to visit. Or maybe you had relatives back in your own country. Or maybe you have friends that come to visit. And maybe they're not related to you. They're not your auntie or your grandma or your cousin, but they're good friends that come to visit. So that's what this is about, when you've got people who you really care about who come to visit you. Let's see if we can think about how that feels, and if you might understand how these people feel together. Maybe you do the same thing they do. The relatives came. What do you use when you go for a visit? Maybe you carry a suitcase, don't you? That's what they have. Oh, they have lots of suitcases. Lots of different kinds of suitcases. And maybe even a picnic basket so they can carry a lunch with them while they're traveling. Oh, there's their house. They left very early in the morning. As a matter of fact, it's so early, it's still dark out. They have a long way to drive. They had to pack up their car with all of their suitcases. And Daddy has to check and make sure the engine is running before they leave. They have a long way to drive. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. So these people grow grapes at their house. Do you eat grapes at your house? Well, we buy grapes at the grocery store, but they grow them, maybe even in their backyard. They weren't quite ready to pick yet, though. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, and in it they put an ice chest full of pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and they came up from Virginia. They left at 4 o'clock in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. Oh no, whoops, what happened? Yikes. Remember I told you about the mountains? Do you see how the land goes very high and then it goes very low? Ooh, look at that road. That would be scary to drive on, don't you think? They drove all day long and even into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and the different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. When you have traveled a long distance from far away, Do you sometimes think about other people who might be living in the houses along the way while you're traveling? Or the cities that you travel through? Do you ever wonder about the people that live there? Yeah, that's what they were saying. The people in the car were thinking about that. Wonder who lives there. Oh, that's a different house. Our house doesn't grow or come out of the side of a mountain like that. That's different. So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Oh, we were so excited. Oh my goodness, their suitcases are falling off. Oh, it was hugging time. Talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, even crying sometimes because they were so happy to see us. They hugged us for hours. Isn't that what it feels like when you see somebody that you know that you haven't seen in a long time? Do you hug them really tight? And do you hug them and smile? Maybe even a little tear comes out of your eyes because you're so happy to see them. Maybe if you're boys, you don't hug. Instead, you kind of shove each other around. Everybody was so excited and so happy to see each other. Then we went into the house, and there was so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen all the way to the front room. Yeah, those relatives. Hugging, hugging, hugging. And finally, after a big supper, 2 or 3 times around until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s throughout the house. When somebody comes to visit, do you have a big meal? Yeah, do you have lots of food and share that food with your family or your friends? And then does everybody sit down and talk? Yeah, just like that. Maybe the kids go play. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extra beds. So a few of them squeezed in with us, and the rest slept on the floor. And some had their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. Yep, we all just kind of slept, squished together. It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. She doesn't look like she's sleeping a whole lot yet. And the relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden, take care of the garden. See, they're going to grow their own vegetables, I think. And then they helped us fix any broken things that might be hanging around. And even take care of chores, like cutting hair. And then we played. That's what's fun about family. You don't really have to do a whole lot of work. You just get to have fun when family comes to visit. Then they ate up all our strawberries and our watermelon, and then promised that we could eat up all their grapes and their peaches when we came to Virginia. Oh, look, what else do they do when they come visit? Do you do that too when you have friends or family come to visit? Maybe you don't play the same instruments, but do you sing and dance? Yeah, maybe. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and just breathing together. You know what this is? This is an old kind of a camera. They're taking pictures of the whole group before they leave. That's an old-fashioned kind. But he's having a hard time getting everybody to look all at once, isn't he? Yeah, that's kind of hard when everybody's there. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia. At 4 o'clock in the morning, we stood there in our pajamas and waved at them in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road, and then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet, and we fell asleep. And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and the different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home for them in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us too. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about next time they would come to visit. Oh, there's their grapes. That's fun when you have people come visit you, isn't it?